very much. Obviously, welcome to here to Taylor. Obviously, we have a fair amount from our office, but we have some of our research partners that joined us as well, so that's really exciting. Very happy to have the authors here of Marketing to the New Majority. It is a book that we're going to discuss and learn a little bit more. Certainly, marketplace has changed quite a bit. You know, multiculturalism really is the mainstream, and I think that we've seen that in some of the work that we've done. You know, there have been population shifts. There's been shifts in mindset. We're really looking for a lively conversation here. We want to have discussion throughout. So I know that because I want conversation to happen, I seeded books with a few people who I know will be asking questions. And Christian, who else got a book? Maeve Hagen, who I know will ask questions. But these are our thought leaders, and I know the folks will ask questions. So just wanted to introduce Ola Mobolade, who is with Firefly Millward Brown and works in their qualitative group. And David, I'm going to butcher this. Can you say the last name?
Burgos.
See, I can't. I'm not quite capable of saying that. Who heads up Millward Brown's Multicultural Practice. So thank you very much to both.
Basically, we'll tell you a little bit about where the book came from, kind of what it was born from. But we by no means want this to be all about numbers and data. There's a much more compelling story here. And we are in the midst of a really interesting time for marketing communications as a whole, but certainly from a research perspective, there are big shifts happening. So we'll take you through a little bit of the numbers. We'll explain to you what we mean by the new majority consumer, because it's kind of an interesting double meaning idea. Then we'll get into a bit of the marketing implications and talk a bit more specifically about what this might mean for your business. One of the things that is an assumption that we want to bust a little bit is the idea that this is just a big kind of coastal city phenomenon. Because of course you think of the increasing diversification of the US and you think of your New Yorks and your LAs. And the fact of the matter is, when you take a look at this, the dark green is the ethnic population, the non-white population. So we can see that this is happening from coast to coast, this increase. You look at cities like Minneapolis that you might not typically think of as an ethnic market, and it's 21% ethnic, right? You have certainly a number of majority-minority cities like El Paso at 87%, Los Angeles at 68%, Miami, and so on. So this is the future for the country as a whole, but it again is now for many of these cities. And you know, there is a trend that is not changing or reversing anytime soon that we all have our eye on, and it really deals with the fact that, I'll back up for a moment, that we see growth in all the ethnic segments. It's pretty much flat growth among the white non-Hispanic group. And you can see that green line representing Hispanics is skyrocketing, really. What happens when we aggregate all of the ethnic segments, we see a rate of growth that around 2042, as I alluded to before, it will be majority-minority. Now, much closer in, at about 2025, we're going to be in a situation where most households are, over 50% of families with kids are going to be multi-ethnic. So we're seeing that multiculturalism at a really micro level, not just kind of the big picture.
Before we go into those implications, we wanted to share with you some facts, if you want, about the new majority consumer that many people might not know, because we kind of always follow stereotypes that there are out there about these consumers. The first one that we wanted to share with you, and kind of address that one, is that when we say the new majority, we are also talking about whites. Whites are also part of the new majority, and actually the most important part of the new majority, because they are still the majority of the population. So we need to keep that in mind. I know that it's difficult to measure how multicultural white consumers are, but we try to do that we conducted a lifestyle segmentation, analyzing a lot of attitudinal variables, lot of variables there, and some of them were culture related. Like, for example, you are open to interracial marriage, you are open to ethnic advertising in mainstream TV. So many questions that kind of gave us an idea of how open to multiculturalism whites were. So when we talk about the new majority, we are not only talking about ethnic segments in particular, but to everybody in the US that have this kind of multicultural mindset. So it's people that are exposed and are influenced by different ethnic groups other than the one they were born into.
And if I could interject, David wrote a pretty controversial article recently about whites as part of this multicultural mainstream. Yeah. And we didn't think it was controversial because we assumed that everybody understood that diverse didn't meant diverse.
I got a lot of swear words.
Yeah. Yeah.
The title was the role of white consumers in the multicultural mainstream. The role of white consumers, and everything. Who cares about whites? That was kind of the main comment, but you should care because they are still the majority and they are the most important thing. The point that we make here is that we always talk about how ethnic segments are influencing the mainstream. For example, how the new general market is changing because of whites, because of blacks, because of Hispanics. But we never talk about how Hispanics and African Americans also change because of the white consumer. We change a lot.
Yeah.
We change ethnic segments also change a lot because of the influence that they have from the white consumer. So the point that we make here is that to really understand the new general market, you have to understand everybody, not only whites or not only the ethnic segments. You have to understand all of them and see how they interact among each other.
I don't know if you guys have run across this, but I often, when we get RFPs for research, the clients will say, we'll talk about who their target is, and they'll say Hispanics, and I'll say, what, tell me more, and they'll say unacculturated, and I'll say, tell me more, and that's sort of it. And so to David's point, it's great to kind of have an understanding, especially when it comes to communications, where there could be an in-language component. It's nice to understand kind of where people are, but it's really just a tool for understanding kind of what language to communicate in, not who the target is.
Well, that's so important to take language as part of culture. It's not sort of culture in its totality, and I think some people, particularly among Hispanics, tend to make that a default.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah, language is not culture.
When you get clients coming to you with that same example, do you find yourselves pushing more to a psychographic?
Absolutely. That's where the insights play in hugely. And one of the main reasons is that there is an ingoing assumption that we have to talk to these consumers differently, and that may be the case, but when we have research-supported insights, we can start to understand where there are similarities. And we have some examples of brands that have done a really good job. McDonald's is one that comes to mind, where you go in sort of ethnicity agnostic, right? You do research among everyone, you test every strategy, no matter if it comes from an ethnic agency or general market agency, among everyone, and understand where there is overlap. And there's great efficiency there, but you also have to be prepared for the possibility of there being incredible differences, not only across segments, but within a given segment. And I think the way we talk about segments is going to be really different. I mean, when you talk to young teens and tweens now, they almost don't understand what you're talking about when you sort of speak in these really sort of segmented, ethnically segmented terms. So it's losing relevance, I think, as the role of race evolves. Role of race and identity evolves among the younger.
And that's not limited by geography either, in terms of that mindset shift?
I think it's definitely more pronounced in the big cities, where you are sort of forced into close contact with people different than you. So I find myself having to catch myself, because we live in New York City, right? So you're like, okay. But as we kind of pointed out on that map, it's becoming rarer and rarer to find any city, whether it's an A or B or C market, where you're not going to have exposure to some other cultures.